The sound of crystal glasses clinking in celebration of the new public relations director had only just begun to fade when a sharp, wheezing noise erupted from my throat, harsh and jagged, like a kettle long past its boiling point. I am Sailor Cole, an expert in antique book restoration, someone far more accustomed to the quiet murmur of aging pages, the subtle smell of leather and dust, and the meticulous stillness of a library than to the grandeur and pretense of an evening like this. I was completely out of place in this room filled with tailored suits, glossy smiles, and the carefully measured laughter of people who practice charm like an art form. My sister, Sloane, stood on the small podium at the front of the VIP room, her teeth impossibly white beneath the warm amber lighting. She leaned into the microphone with that signature PR smile she could wear on command, a smile that never reached her eyes. "Here we go again," she said, voice laced with deliberate, theatrical exhaustion. "Sailor, don't make a scene. It's only mushroom soup. There's no crab. Or do you want to ruin my promotion party?" A ripple of uneasy laughter swept through the room. Sloane believed she had landed a perfectly timed quip, a clever jab to display her wit to the crowd. She thrived in these moments, soaking in their attention and approval. But she hadn't anticipated the man across from me, Magnus Thorne, the group chairman and the very person who had approved her promotion, watching the scene unfold with a look of absolute horror. Magnus Thorne's daughter suffers from a deadly shellfish allergy. He knows precisely what anaphylaxis looks like, exactly how it manifests when someone's airway begins to close. And before I could even comprehend what was happening, Magnus was in motion. He pulled an EpiPen from the inside pocket of his impeccably tailored $5,000 suit and moved toward me with an astonishing speed that defied his 58 years. But to truly understand why I was now in this near-fatal situation, I need to rewind to earlier that evening. The night had been intended as a private celebration of Sloane's promotion, a dinner in the VIP room of Etoile, a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant with a waiting list that spanned months and required a credit card with no spending limit. The room glowed in a golden haze, everything illuminated as though part of a luxury magazine spread. Chandeliers dripped with crystals, reflecting the light in soft prisms across dark, polished wood paneling. The air was thick with the scent of wealth, ambition, and old money legacy. I am 26 years old. Despite my youth, I had already established a reputation as one of the nation's leading antique book conservators. Some in scholarly circles refer to me as the surgeon for history because of my exacting precision, my analytical mind, and my in-depth understanding of the chemistry that preserves centuries-old artifacts. I handle materials older than most countries, saving manuscripts that have survived fires, floods, wars, and neglect. My work requires patience, silence, and a deep respect for fragility. Sloane, by contrast, is 29, recently promoted to Public Relations Director at Thorne Global, one of the largest multinational corporations in the country. She wears designer clothes like armor, keeps her hair flawless, and can summon or erase a smile like a switch. Where I am meticulous, she is impulsive. Where I safeguard, she dismantles. Our parents, Alistair and Cordelia Cole, 60 and infamously self-absorbed, sat at the table beaming at Sloane's promotion, basking in the reflected glow of her achievement. They delighted in recounting her professional triumphs and high-profile connections, while perpetually belittling my work as dusty, dull, and inconsequential. In their eyes, I was the disappointing child who chose dusty tomes over boardrooms. The events leading to my poisoning, yes, let us call it what it truly was, began long before the first course was served. Earlier in the evening, Sloane had been lingering in the restaurant lobby, anticipating Magnus Thorne's arrival. She attempted to intercept him, hoping to impress him with a prepared media report on Thorne Global's latest acquisition. She craved his praise, his attention. Instead, Magnus's gaze landed on me. He approached, animated and genuinely interested, and spent nearly 20 minutes discussing the delicate process of deacidifying centuries-old paper. He asked detailed questions about pH levels, alkalinization techniques, and the differences between European and Asian paper fibers. He shared information about a recent acquisition of 18th century letters and invited me to consult on their preservation. I watched Sloane as this conversation unfolded. Her jaw tightened, her fingers curled into fists. The simmering fury behind her composed facade was unmistakable. This evening, this celebration was meant to be her moment, and here I was, the quiet, inconspicuous sister, absorbing the attention of the most influential man in the room. Sloane's jealousy was unhinged, dangerous. She wanted to humiliate me, to demonstrate to everyone that I was weak, or worse, that I was manipulating my supposed allergy for attention. She believed a trace of crab essence would be harmless, maybe producing mild itching or a few hives. Her plan was to ruin my dignity before Magnus, our parents, and the gathered guests. I did not witness her preparation, but piecing together accounts later made it clear. About 30 minutes before the soup course, Sloane excused herself and approached Chef Bastien, the creative mind behind Etoile's reinterpretations of classic French cuisine. With her megawatt PR smile in place, she requested, "I have a special favor. Your famed crab fat oil, the one in your signature bouillabaisse, reputedly unparalleled, could you add just a trace to my sister's truffle mushroom soup?" Chef Bastien hesitated. Crab and truffle was not a standard pairing, but he thrived on experimentation. He considered the umami richness of crab fat against the earthy depth of truffles and mushrooms and concluded that it could work. "For you, Miss Cole, on this special occasion," he said, bowing slightly, "I will prepare a single amuse-bouche with the crab oil." "Thank you," Sloane said sweetly. "You are an artist." What Chef Bastien could not know was the malicious intent behind Sloane's request. He had no idea the guest in question suffered from a life-threatening shellfish allergy. The bowl he prepared so carefully was to be wielded as a weapon. When the soup arrived, it was breathtaking. The reddish-brown oil swirled atop the truffle mushroom base, catching the candlelight like molten copper. Sloane leaned in, voice deceptively tender. "I asked Chef Bastien to add a hint of smoked chili oil and pine mushroom extract to yours," she said. "I know rich foods overwhelm you, so this will make it easier. A subtle warmth, nothing too heavy." I should have been vigilant. Vigilance is my nature. It is what makes me skilled at my craft. But that night, surrounded by Sloane's false benevolence, the room's grandeur, the golden lighting, I was deceived. The scent of truffle mushrooms dominated my senses, masking the faint fishiness of the crab oil. I tasted it, savoring the rich, complex flavor, thinking for a fleeting moment that Sloane had actually acted kindly. And then the reaction hit.
My throat constricted with terrifying force, my windpipe closing as though gripped in a merciless hand. My lips tingled, then burned, then swelled. My tongue thickened in my mouth, obstructing my airway. Red, furious hives erupted across my arms and chest. My legs buckled beneath me. The room pitched sideways. I collapsed onto the carpet, struggling for breath, clawing at my throat, making sounds that were hardly human. And through it all, I heard Sloane laugh. Not nervously, not with panic, but triumphant. "See?" she called. She framed it as performance, basking in the reactions around her. Some guests laughed uncertainly. Others froze, uneasy, questioning whether this was a cruel joke or something far more sinister. Sloane advanced, her smirk unwavering. "Drop the act now," she said. "You've got everyone's attention. Isn't that what you wanted?" I tried to communicate, to make her understand, that this was no act, that I was fighting for my life. My vision narrowed, black spots creeping into the edges. This is how it ends, I thought. Killed by my own sister, at a dinner party, while everyone assumes it's a joke. Magnus Thorne was already there. He had dropped to his knees beside me, EpiPen in hand. "Move," he shouted, cutting through the room's chaotic noise. "Someone call an ambulance." "Hold still," he commanded. The needle pierced my thigh, through fabric and skin, and the epinephrine surged into my system. My airway eased, just enough for a shallow, whistling breath. Magnus barked orders, directing staff with precision, orchestrating an emergency response. Sloane's smugness vanished as she took in the scene, the EpiPen, my swollen lips, the gravity of the situation. My parents' expressions shifted from pride to horror. My father's gaze traveled from the soup to Sloane. "Sloane," he said slowly, "what did you do?" I felt my strength returning in increments. I seized Magnus's wrist, my fingers clamping around his expensive watch. My other hand pointed at the soup bowl, then formed a fist, signaling preserve, hold, protect. Magnus understood immediately. "No one touches that soup," he roared. "Security, seal this table. This is a crime scene." Guards moved decisively, forming a protective barrier. "Mr. Thorne," Sloane said, forcing a laugh. "Isn't that a little dramatic? It's just a misunderstanding. Nothing leaves this room." Magnus interrupted her, his voice cold as Arctic ice. "Not the dishes, not the soup, not a single napkin. Everything stays exactly where it is until the authorities arrive." My mother grabbed Sloane's arm. "Tell me you didn't do this on purpose," she whispered urgently. "Tell me this was an accident." Sloane opened her mouth to answer, but no sound came out. Her face had gone sheet white. I lay on the floor, still holding Magnus's wrist, and felt a grim satisfaction spread through me, despite the pain, despite the fear, despite the fact that I could barely breathe. I had used my last bit of strength to preserve the most important evidence, the soup that nearly killed me, the proof of what my sister had done. That was my first small victory before the darkness started to creep in at the edges of my vision again. The last thing I remember before the paramedics arrived was Magnus leaning over me, his hand steady on my shoulder, and saying, "You're a fighter. Good. You're going to need that." The paramedics worked on me right there in the VIP room, while Magnus gave orders like a general commanding troops. They gave me another dose of epinephrine, hooked me up to oxygen, checked my vital signs. My blood pressure was dangerously low. My oxygen saturation was in the 70s. It should have been in the 90s. "We need to transport immediately," one of the paramedics said. "She needs to be in the ER under observation. Anaphylaxis can have a biphasic reaction. She could crash again in a few hours." But before they could wheel me out on the stretcher, Magnus turned to face Sloane. His expression was carved from stone. "You said this was normal mushroom soup?" he asked her, his voice deadly quiet. Sloane's hands were shaking. She clasped them together to hide it. "Yes," she said, but her voice cracked on the word. Of course it was normal mushrooms. The girl always overreacts to everything. She's probably just having a panic attack. "A panic attack doesn't cause your airway to close," Magnus said flatly. "A panic attack doesn't require an EpiPen. Stop lying." That was when Chef Bastien burst into the VIP room. He had been in the kitchen when Andy informed him that there had been a medical emergency involving the soup. He had been told that a guest was allergic to shellfish. The words had hit him like a physical blow. "Miss Sloane," he said, his face flushed with distress and confusion. "The waiter just told me what happened. But I don't understand. You requested the crab fat oil yourself. You asked me to add it to the truffle soup. You said it was your special request." A tense hush cut through the chaos of the banquet room. Every eye turned to Sloane. "You said you liked it," Chef Bastien continued, not realizing he was signing her death warrant with every word. "You said it would be novel and unexpected. I thought you wanted to try it." Andy stepped forward then, the young waiter who had been serving our table all evening. "And Miss Sloane signaled for me to place that specific bowl in front of Miss Saylor," he added quietly. "I remember because you made very clear eye contact with me and pointed to our seat." Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. I lay on the stretcher, the oxygen mask covering half my face, and I watched my family's illusions collapse in real time. My father's face had gone gray. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. They were staring at Sloane like they had never seen her before. Because this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't even negligence. This was a deliberate trap, carefully planned and coldly executed. "Sloane," my father said, his voice hollow. "Tell me they're wrong. Tell me you didn't do this on purpose." Sloane looked around the room wildly, like a cornered animal searching for an escape route. "I just thought, she always makes such a big deal about her allergy. I thought if she just had a tiny bit, she'd realize she's been exaggerating all these years. I thought it would just make her a little uncomfortable, maybe get some hives. I never meant for it to be this serious." "You never meant to almost kill your sister?" Magnus said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Is that your defense?" "It was supposed to be harmless." Sloane's voice was rising now, becoming shrill. "She's always been so dramatic about everything. I just wanted her to stop being the center of attention for once. This is my night, my promotion, and she has to make it all about her and her stupid allergy." "Shut up," my father said. I had never heard him speak to Sloane that way before. In our family, Sloane was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. My father's harsh tone shocked everyone into silence. "We need to leave," one of the paramedics said urgently. "Her condition could deteriorate. She needs to be in a hospital." They started wheeling me toward the door. As I passed my family, I looked each of them in the eye. My mother was crying, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. My father looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. And Sloane. Sloane looked terrified. Good, I thought. Be terrified. The most sophisticated caxicity doesn't come from slaps or obvious violence. It comes from actions that are sugar-coated in the name of care. When someone deliberately tests your safety boundaries, when they play with your life and call it a joke, they aren't joking.
They are showing you exactly who they are. I had spent 26 years being the understanding younger sister, the quiet one, the one who didn't make waves or cause scenes, the one who accepted being overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed, because keeping the peace was easier than fighting back. But as those ambulance doors closed and the sirens started wailing, something fundamental shifted inside me. Sloane wasn't just jealous. She was willing to risk my life, genuinely risk ending it just to satisfy her ego, just to punish me for daring to be good at something, for daring to be interesting to someone who mattered. And my parents, who had always defended Sloane, who had always made excuses for her cruelty and dismissed my hurt feelings as oversensitivity, they could no longer deny the naked truth that had just been laid bare before their eyes. I felt a coldness spread through me, and it had nothing to do with the anaphylaxis. It was the cold that comes when emotional bonds snap like overstretched rubber bands. It was the ice that forms when you finally stop lying to yourself about people you love. The paramedic adjusted my oxygen mask. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently.
I couldn't speak yet, my throat was still too swollen, and the damage to my vocal cords would take weeks to heal, but I raised my hand and made a gesture that she interpreted as okay. I wasn't okay, though. Not physically, and certainly not emotionally, but I was clear-eyed. I was done being the submissive younger sister who accepted crumbs of affection and swallowed injuries in silence. I would handle this the way I handle a book that's been eaten by mold, with ruthless precision, removing every trace of the harmful agent until nothing remained but clean paper. Sloane had tried to destroy me. Instead, she had freed me. Now I will show her what happens when you push someone who has spent their whole life being careful, being controlled, being quiet. You don't get an explosion. You get something far worse. You get precision. The chaos spilled out from the restaurant lobby onto the sidewalk, just as the ambulance doors were being prepped to receive me. Magnus Thorne stood near the rear of the vehicle, his phone already in his hand, his finger hovering over the number for his personal attorney, who also had direct connections to the district attorney's office. "I'm calling the police," he announced. Sloane had followed us out, pushing past the security team, desperate to control the narrative. Her heels clicked frantically on the pavement. "This is attempted murder, or at the very least, aggravated assault. Miss Cole will be arrested tonight." Sloane went white as paper, the last traces of color in her cheeks drained away completely. "No," she whispered. "No, please, Mr. Thorne. It was a mistake. I didn't mean—" "You admitted to deliberately contaminating your sister's food with a substance you knew she was deathly allergic to," Magnus said coldly. "You did this at a company event, using company resources while representing Thorne Global as our new PR director. If I call the police right now, you'll be in handcuffs before midnight. Your career will be over before it begins. And given the premeditated nature of this attack, you're looking at serious prison time." My mother grabbed Sloane's arm, her face crumpling. "Oh, my sweet girl, what have you done? What have you done?" My father stood frozen, his brain clearly trying to calculate the social and professional fallout of having a daughter arrested for attempted murder at a Michelin-starred restaurant. The scandal would be enormous, inescapable. But I saw something else happening. I saw the way Magnus's hand tightened on his phone. I saw the way the other dinner guests were hovering nearby, their phones out, probably already texting their friends about the drama. I saw the restaurant manager wringing his hands, clearly terrified about the publicity nightmare this would create. And I saw my opportunity. Despite lying on the stretcher with my throat still swollen and my voice reduced to a hoarse rasp, I raised my hand. I clawed the oxygen mask down from my face. "Ma'am, please keep that on," the paramedic insisted, trying to replace it. "You need the oxygen." I pushed her hand away weakly but firmly. "Wait," I managed to croak out. The single word felt like swallowing broken glass. Magnus turned to look at me, surprised. Everyone went silent, straining to hear what I would say. I looked directly at Magnus, my eyes clear despite everything my body had just been through. "Don't call the police. Yet," I said, each word a physical struggle. The paramedic was checking my monitors anxiously. "Arresting the PR director will cause Thorne Global's stock to plummet. I don't want to affect your assets." I took a ragged breath. "My lawyer will handle it. Tomorrow." The relief that flooded my family's faces was almost comical. My mother let out a sob of gratitude. "Oh, Sailor, thank you, thank you. You're such a good girl, such a good sister." My father's shoulders sagged. "We'll work this out as a family. We'll sit down tomorrow and talk through everything calmly." And Sloane looked at me with a mixture of relief and contempt. I could read her expression clearly. She thinks I'm weak. She thinks I'm too scared to press charges. She thinks family loyalty will win out in the end. "Sailor," she said, stepping closer to the ambulance, her voice taking on that sweet, manipulative tone she uses when she wants something. "I know you're upset right now, and you have every right to be, but we're sisters. We're family. We can work through this together. Maybe some therapy, some family counseling." I held up my hand to stop her. When I spoke again, my voice was a breathless whisper, but crystal clear. "My lawyer will contact you with the terms." "Terms?" Sloane blinked, confused. "For the settlement," I clarified, fighting the urge to cough. "You're going to pay for what you did. Every penny." Her face hardened. "You're going to sue me? Your own sister? Would you prefer prison?" I asked simply. 8 years, state facility, or a civil settlement? Your choice." Magnus looked at me with something like approval in his eyes. "Your lawyer should call my office as well," he said. "I'll make sure Chef Bastian and Andy provide full statements about what happened tonight. Thorne Global will cooperate completely with any legal proceedings." "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me," Magnus said quietly. "You saved yourself tonight." Preserving that evidence was smart. Most people in your situation would have been too panicked to think clearly. "I work with fragile things," I said, finally allowing the paramedic to replace the mask. "I know how to protect them." "We really need to go now," the paramedic said firmly, signaling the driver. "She needs to be under medical supervision." As the ambulance doors started to close, I took one last look at my family standing on the sidewalk. They thought I had shown mercy. They thought I had chosen family over justice. They thought I was still the same quiet, accommodating sailor who always put their needs before her own. They were wrong. I needed time. Time to build an airtight case. Time to let them relax their guard. Time to gather every piece of evidence that would make what came next absolutely undeniable. Sloane thought working with a lawyer tomorrow meant some gentle negotiation, maybe a small payment to smooth things over, maybe an apology that would let us all move on and pretend this never happened. She had no idea what was coming. I spent 3 days in the hospital. The anaphylaxis had done more damage than the doctors initially realized.
My vocal cords were inflamed and damaged from the swelling, leaving my voice hoarse and weak. I would need weeks of speech therapy to fully recover. The repeated doses of epinephrine had strained my heart, requiring cardiac monitoring. And psychologically, I was a mess. Nightmares of choking, panic attacks triggered by the smell of mushrooms, a bone-deep terror every time I had to eat anything. But I didn't rest. I didn't waste a single moment feeling sorry for myself. On the second day, while I was still hooked up to IVs and monitors, I had my lawyer, Mr. Lewis, visit me. He was a sharp, aggressive attorney in his mid-40s who specialized in civil litigation and personal injury cases. I had hired him 3 years ago to handle a contract dispute, and he had impressed me with his ruthless efficiency. "Tell me everything," he said, pulling out his tablet to take notes. I told him every detail, every moment, the conversation Magnus had with me that set off Sloane's jealousy, the way she had disappeared to speak with the chef, the soup that nearly killed me, the confession in front of witnesses. "This is airtight," Mr. Lewis said, his eyes gleaming. "She confessed in front of a room full of people, including the CEO of a major corporation. We have the chef's testimony about her specific request to add crab oil. We have the server's testimony about her directing that bowl to your place. We have physical evidence in the form of the soup itself. And we have Magnus Thorne as a witness to your medical emergency and his immediate intervention." "I want affidavits from Chef Bastian and Andy," I said, my damaged voice barely above a whisper, "in writing, notarized, before they have a chance to be pressured by my family or anyone else." "Consider it done," Mr. Lewis said. "I'll have them within 48 hours. And I want a full medical report documenting every injury, the throat damage, the cardiac strain, the psychological trauma, everything. Already ordered. The hospital is cooperating fully." I looked at him steadily. "I want her destroyed, Mr. Lewis. Not hurt, not embarrassed, destroyed. I want her to lose everything she values, her career, her money, her reputation. I want my parents to understand exactly what their golden child is capable of. And I want it all done legally, cleanly, and completely." Mr. Lewis smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted prey. "How much are we asking for?" $900,000, I said without hesitation. "That's enough to ruin her financially, but not so much that it seems unreasonable to a mediator. It covers my medical expenses, lost income, pain and suffering, and the cost of psychiatric care. And it's just low enough that she'll think she's getting off easy. You've thought this through." "I've had nothing but time to think," I said. "And one more thing. I want this settled in mediation, not in court. Court takes too long, and I want this done quickly. 3 weeks from tonight. Can you arrange that? For $900,000 in a clear-cut case, the defense will jump at mediation. They'll be terrified of what a jury would award." "Good," I said, "because my silence isn't forgiveness. It's strategy." Mr. Lewis stood up, closing his tablet. "Your sister tried to kill you, Miss Cole. She deserves everything that's coming to her. She tried to diminish me," I corrected quietly. "She tried to make me small, to make me weak, to prove I was nothing. That's even worse than trying to kill me, because she wanted me to survive it. She wanted me to live with the humiliation." I leaned back against the hospital pillows, suddenly exhausted. "Instead," I continued, "she's going to learn what happens when you underestimate someone who spends their life working with things that are fragile but precious. You learn how to protect them, you learn how to repair them, and you learn how to remove anything that threatens them, completely, permanently, and without mercy." My lawyer left with his marching orders. Over the next 2 weeks, while I recovered at home, he worked like a man possessed. He obtained sworn affidavits from Chef Bastian and Andy. He collected medical records and expert opinions. He compiled a case file that was absolutely damning. And my family? They thought I was healing. They thought I was processing the trauma. They thought I was deciding whether to forgive and forget. My mother sent flowers, expensive arrangements that I immediately donated to the hospital. My father called twice, leaving rambling voicemails about not letting this tear the family apart. And Sloan sent a text message. "Can we talk? I think there's been a misunderstanding." I didn't respond to any of them. My silence wasn't forgiveness. It was the quiet before the storm. It was the moment when you hold your breath and aim carefully, because you only get one shot. And when Mr. Lewis called on day 19 to tell me the mediation was scheduled for day 21, exactly 3 weeks after the incident, I smiled for the first time since the poisoning. "Perfect," I whispered into the phone, my voice still hoarse, but getting stronger every day. "Let's end this." It took 3 weeks for the swelling to subside enough that I could speak without pain, and for my body to stabilize enough that I could sit upright for more than an hour without my heart racing like a trapped bird. That's how long it took for Mr. Lewis to compile every scrap of evidence into a legal file, so airtight that even the most expensive defense attorney in the state would advise their client to settle. That's how long my family waited before they tried to sweep attempted murder under the rug like it was a wine stain on expensive carpet. The mediation room smelled like lemon furniture polish and desperation. It was one of those corporate spaces designed to look neutral. Beige walls, a long oak table, leather chairs that squeaked when you shifted your weight. The kind of room where million-dollar deals died quietly, where careers ended with a signature instead of a scene. I arrived early with Mr. Lewis, my hands still trembling slightly from the medication I'd be on for the next 6 months. The doctor said the tremors would fade. I wasn't sure I wanted them to. They were a reminder of what had almost been taken from me. Sloan walked in 12 minutes late, because of course she did. Even now, she couldn't resist the power play of making everyone wait. She wore a dove gray dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair pulled back in a soft chignon that screamed innocent victim. The makeup was perfect, just enough to look put together, not so much that she seemed callous, but it was her expression that made my stomach turn, that carefully practiced look of remorse. Eyes just slightly wider than usual, lips pressed together in what was supposed to be anguished restraint. I'd seen that face 1,000 times growing up. It was the face she made when she wanted something, when she needed someone to believe her, when she was about to lie so smoothly that even she might believe it. Mom and Dad flanked her like bodyguards. Dad's jaw was set in that stubborn way that meant he'd already decided how this was going to go. Mom kept glancing at me with eyes that held something I'd never seen before. Fear. Maybe mixed with a desperate kind of pleading. They looked at me the way people look at bomb timers, counting down. "Sailor," Mom started, her voice doing that soft, soothing thing she used to do when I was little and had scraped my knee. "Honey, we're so glad you're feeling better." I didn't respond. Mr. Lewis had coached me. Speak only when necessary. Let the evidence do the talking.
Don't let them manipulate your emotions. I folded my hands on the table, felt the cool wood beneath my palms, and waited. Sloan leaned forward, and right on cue, her eyes began to glisten. "Sailor, Her voice cracked perfectly, a hairline fracture in porcelain. "I need you to know how sorry I am. I swear, I only thought you'd get an itchy rash or something. Maybe your throat would get a little scratchy. I just wanted to tease you a bit, get you to loosen up, stop being so serious all the time." She reached across the table like she wanted to take my hand. I pulled mine back. "I didn't know," she continued, and now there were actual tears. Impressive, really. "I didn't know you would almost die. If I'd known, I never would have." Stop. The word came out harder than I intended, sharp enough that everyone flinched. My mother jumped in immediately, her own version of damage control. "Sailor, please. Your sister made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but she didn't mean for things to go this far. After all, she didn't think it would be this bad. Can't you just let it go?" Let it go? As if my sister hadn't watched me convulse on a restaurant floor, as if she hadn't put crab fat oil into my soup, and then sat there, wine glass in hand, waiting to see what would happen, as if I didn't think it would be this bad, was somehow a defense for poisoning someone. Dad cleared his throat, his voice taking on that paternal weight that used to make me fall in line as a kid. "Sailor, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But at the end of the day, no matter what happens, we are your only family, aren't we? Family forgives. Family moves forward." Something inside me cracked, but not the way they wanted. I felt it in my chest, that final tether snapping clean.
The obligation, the guilt, the desperate childhood wish that someday they'd choose me first. All of it fell away like dead weight. My voice came out shaking, but not from weakness, from rage, from grief, from the sudden, dizzying clarity of someone who just stepped out of a burning building and could finally see the sky. No, Sloane's perfectly crafted expression flickered. No, I don't want a family like this. I looked at each of them in turn. Sloane with her designer victimhood, Mom with her enabler's desperation, Dad with his patriarch's entitlement. I absolutely will not let it go. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the wall clock ticking. Mr. Lewis chose that moment to open his briefcase. The snap of the lock sounded like a judge's gavel. "Miss Cole," he said, addressing Sloane with the kind of clinical coldness that made it clear there were no diminutives here, no sisterly nicknames, no family ties that would soften what came next. "You are a PR director. You've built a career on understanding optics, on manipulating narratives, on knowing exactly how actions will be perceived." He pulled out a document, slid it across the table. "Which means you are smart enough to know the boundary between a prank and attempted manslaughter." Sloane's face went white. We have testimony from Chef Bestian confirming that you specifically requested crab fat oil be added to your sister's soup." Mr. Lewis's voice never rose, never wavered. "We have testimony from Andy, the server, confirming that you personally ensured the soup went to your sister's place setting. We have toxicology reports confirming the presence of shellfish proteins in Miss Sailor Cole's system at concentrations consistent with deliberate contamination." He pulled out another document, then another. "We have your text messages to Chef Bestian from 3 days before the dinner, asking about ingredients that could cause a reaction. We have your internet search history. How much shellfish causes allergic reaction? Can you hide crab oil in soup? Symptoms of severe allergic reaction." Each piece of evidence landed like a stone in still water, ripple spreading outward. "This was premeditated," Mr. Lewis said, "which elevates it beyond reckless endangerment. The DA's office has indicated they would pursue charges of aggravated assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Given the evidence of planning, you're looking at 8 years in a state correctional facility." The color drained from my parents' faces. Sloane started shaking her head, fast, frantic. No, that's not, I didn't mean." "Alternatively," Mr. Lewis continued, his tone shifting just slightly, like a door opening a crack, "my client is willing to settle this matter civilly. We will forego criminal prosecution in exchange for full compensation for medical expenses, pain and suffering, emotional distress, and punitive damages." Dad found his voice. "How much?" Mr. Lewis looked at me. I gave him the smallest nod. $900,000. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "That's insane." Sloane's careful composure shattered completely. "I don't have that kind of money. Nobody our age has that kind of—" "You have a 2-bedroom apartment in Riverside Heights, valued at approximately $400,000, Mr. Lewis recited without looking at notes. "You have jewelry, a vehicle, investment accounts. Your parents have retirement funds, home equity." He leaned forward. "The alternative is prison time, a criminal record, and civil liability that could follow you for decades. This settlement includes a comprehensive release of liability and a non-disclosure agreement that protects your reputation. You get to keep your freedom and whatever dignity you have left." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad stared at the table like the wood grain might rearrange itself into a solution. Sloane looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in our lives. I saw the moment she understood this wasn't her baby sister anymore. This wasn't the girl who'd swallow every slight, who'd make herself smaller so Sloane could shine brighter. This was someone who'd nearly died and decided that survival wasn't enough. I wanted restitution, I wanted consequences, I wanted everything she'd used to hurt me turned against her. "You can't do this," she whispered. I met her gaze, steady. "I can. I am." My parents looked at me with eyes full of something I'd never seen directed at me before. Fear. And underneath it, hatred. The kind of hatred you reserve for someone who's broken the unspoken rules, who's refused to play their assigned role. I looked away. Their opinions didn't matter anymore. It took 45 minutes of negotiation, of my father trying to argue the amount down, of my mother crying, of Sloane alternating between rage and desperation. But in the end, the math was simple. $900,000 or 8 years in prison. They signed. I watched Sloane's hand shake as she put pen to paper, watched the careful signature that had probably graced 1,000 PR documents, now binding her to financial ruin. Watched my parents sign as co-guarantors, their retirement security traded for their golden child's freedom. When it was done, when the papers were collected and the terms were set, full payment within 90 days, with the first installment due in 2 weeks, Sloane looked at me one last time. "I'm your sister," she said, voice hollow. "No," I replied, standing up, gathering my coat. You were someone who tried to kill me. There's a difference. I walked out of that beige room, out of that building, into afternoon sunlight that felt like absolution. Behind me, I heard my mother crying. I heard my father's voice, angry now, saying my name like a curse.
I didn't look back. The seasons had barely changed before news reached me through a former colleague who kept tabs on industry gossip that Sloane Cole was unemployed. The PR firm had let her go quietly, citing restructuring, but everyone knew the truth. Word travels fast in professional circles, especially when it involves someone who'd burned as bright and as publicly as Sloane had. The whispers followed her. Unstable, liability, that girl who poisoned her sister. She'd sold the Riverside Heights apartment at a loss, desperate for quick cash. The jewelry went to a consignment shop. The car, leased, was returned. My parents had withdrawn their entire pension fund and taken out a second mortgage on their house to make up the difference. The first payment had cleared, then the second. Each one a chunk of the life Sloane had built on the foundation of everyone else's diminishment. I learned later, months later, from that same gossipy colleague about the engagement party, one of Sloane's old high school friends, someone who didn't run in PR circles and hadn't heard the stories. Sloane showed up in a borrowed dress, desperation hidden behind that same practiced smile. She'd found him at the cocktail hour. Richard, something or other. Old money. Divorced. Lonely enough to be charmed by a beautiful woman who laughed at his jokes. It was classic Sloane, really. She'd always known how to read people, how to become exactly what they wanted. For 2 months, she played the role perfectly, let him wine and dine her, moved into his penthouse apartment in the financial district, started posting carefully curated photos on social media. Look at me. I'm back. I'm fine. I'm better than ever. But you can't hide who you are forever. Eventually, the mask slips. He caught her lying about something small, where she'd gone to college, maybe, or what she'd done for work. One lie unraveled into another, and another, until he did what any sensible person would do. He started digging. What he found was the truth, not the sanitized version Sloane had tried to sell, but the real story. A woman who'd poisoned her sister, a woman who'd been sued into financial oblivion, a woman who'd do anything, hurt anyone, to claw her way back to the top. He kicked her out. Not dramatically, from what I heard, just coldly, efficiently. Had his assistant pack her things, left them in the lobby, changed the locks. The same way you'd remove any other threat from your life. Last I heard, Sloane was working for a telemarketing company in a strip mall across town, 40 hours a week in a fluorescent lit room, reading scripts to people who hung up on her, making $12 an hour. Sometimes I wondered if she thought about that dinner party, if she lay awake at night in whatever cheap apartment she could afford now, thinking about the moment she decided that hurting me was worth the risk. I hoped she did. 1 year after the night I nearly died, I stood in my library. My library. The words still felt surreal, even after months of saying them. The building was a converted warehouse in the arts district, all exposed brick and enormous windows that let in cascading sheets of natural light. The air smelled like old paper and lemon oil, that particular perfume of preserved history. Rows of custom-built shelves lined the walls, each one holding volumes in various states of restoration. Some were pristine, waiting to be cataloged. Others were works in progress, spines carefully separated from text blocks, pages laid flat under weights, acid damage being painstakingly reversed with specialized solutions. This was my company, Cole Conservation and Restoration. I'd almost used a different last name, wanted to shed that final connection to my family, but Mr. Lewis had advised against it. Own it, he'd said. You're not the one who should be ashamed. The settlement money had been the seed, $900,000, minus legal fees, minus medical expenses, minus the cost of therapy I needed to process what my own sister had done to me. What remained was enough to lease this space, buy equipment, hire 2 junior conservators, and establish a reputation. Turned out, nearly dying had made me something of a legend in certain circles. The book conservator who'd almost been murdered, who'd survived, and built an empire. It was morbid, maybe, but I didn't mind. People remembered me, people hired me, and Magnus Thorne had opened doors I'd never imagined walking through. He'd visited a month after the mediation, showed up at my tiny studio apartment with a contract already drawn up. My entire heritage library, he'd said, simply. 400 years of Thorne family documents, first editions, personal correspondence. I want you to preserve them. I'd asked why. Why trust me with something so valuable? His answer had been characteristically direct. Because you understand that some things are worth saving, and some things need to be cut out, like cancer. You know the difference. That contract alone was worth $200,000 a year for the next 5 years. It had given me credibility, attracted other high-net-worth clients, allowed me to expand faster than I dreamed. Now, a year later, my company was valued at $2.5 million.
I walked through the library, trailing my fingers along spines, feeling the texture of leather and cloth and vellum. Each book was a small universe, a preserved fragment of someone's thoughts, someone's world. Some were damaged when they came to me. Water stains, mold, pages eaten away by time and neglect and acid. I fixed them, carefully, methodically, with patience and precision. I reversed the damage, stabilized what could be saved, and when necessary, made the hard decision to let go of what was too far gone. It was meditative work, solitary work, the kind of work that suited someone who'd learned that not all relationships could be repaired, that sometimes the healthiest thing you could do was seal away the toxic elements and build something new. My junior conservators, Emily and David, were in the back room working on a collection of 18th century letters. I could hear Emily's soft humming, the rustle of tissue paper, the quiet industry of people who loved what they did. I'd built this, not with family money or family connections, but with the compensation for nearly being murdered. Every shelf, every tool, every carefully restored page was proof that I'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and alchemized it into something beautiful. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Lewis. Final payment cleared. Case officially closed. The third and final installment. Sloane's debt, or rather my parents' debt on Sloane's behalf, was paid in full. I stared at the message for a long moment, waiting to feel something. Triumph, maybe, or closure. Instead, I just felt quiet. I walked to the window, looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Sloane was probably sitting in a telemarketing cubicle, reading a script, being hung up on. My parents were probably in their mortgaged house, resenting me, telling each other I'd overreacted, that family should forgive. They were wrong, but it didn't matter anymore. Their opinions were like voices from a country I'd emigrated from, distant, irrelevant, someone else's problem. I turned back to my library, to the restoration table, where a 16th century manuscript waited for my attention. The pages were brittle, edges darkened with age, but the text was still legible, still valuable, still worth saving. I sat down, pulled on my cotton gloves, selected my tools with the precision of a surgeon. This is what I did now. I preserved what was precious. I eliminated harmful agents, whether they were acid on paper or toxicity in blood relations. I carefully opened the manuscript, began assessing the damage, planning the restoration. Outside, the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like golden snow. My life was whole now, brilliant, built on the ashes of the career of the sister who tried to kill me. And for the first time in 26 years, I was exactly where I needed to be.